Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, simul-streaming to the weekly Huddle Channel 2. So we've got 2 streams going. It is good to see Newt and Owen. Bill, welcome to Thursday night.
Yeah. Thursday nights are the best nights, Bill.
We set you guys up over on Wednesday nights just to lead into you guys. We're your openers, okay?
That's totally fine. Everyone needs an opening act.
We had a pretty good 2-round mock draft as an opening act. Like, Newt's building his big board for this episode. He's texting me, Jim, you got to add this guy to offensive tackle, and he's checking out on the mock draft, make sure the Packers pick the right players. So,
which they did, and I appreciate. That was solid.
Yes,
we were productive.
Yeah,
for the 2 hours leading up to this podcast.
I gotta know. I had to cut off before it ended. Did anyone snag Luke Andrew in the second round?
No.
It was almost perfect. It was almost perfect.
I almost gave you a heart attack because I took Riley Mills, but he ended up in Chicago. So
I was there for that. I didn't even care. I was like, my guy is getting the love that he deserves. I know he's big on your board too. Yes. I think this. I was thinking this when you were saying it, Bill, because I was live when you said it, and I thought it was funny. Like years past and everything. You listen to a lot of podcasts, and like you get a feel for like what guys or what podcasters like have their guys, and like the fact that like it is known amongst the Draft Professor like my 2 or 3 guys. It's like I'm living that this year in the 2025 NFL draft cycle. So that's a ton of fun.
Yep.
So I think I'm spoiled, right? Because I get to listen to every Draft Professor podcast to the point where there's only 2 other podcasters I can even stand to listen to now.
Who are they, Jim?
Marino and Kyle Krabs.
Okay.
I can't listen. Okay. Like I turn on like Bootleg or I turn on NFL Stock Exchange, and I just lose interest. I'd rather hear what Bill likes or Newt likes or Owen, right? Like I'd rather hear your opinion of somebody I get to talk to than somebody that's never going to respond to me. Right? Like the interaction for me is actually like very real.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kind of thing. So we're doing offensive tackles. And I don't remember how this idea came up 1 or 2 weeks ago, but it was like, well, we haven't done offensive tackles with Newton and Owen. Why don't we do offensive tackles? I don't even remember how it came up.
I think it was that we were originally D tackles in the interior offensive line, and I think we did an episode of our edge rusher rankings. We talked about edge rushers for an episode. Really, we got to finish up like the rest of the hog mollies and just cover the rest of the line here.
Yeah. I think I echo that. It's just you got to get the trench, the full trench, not just the center of it.
Yeah. So we have 3 boards. Newt's board is the one on the left. Owen's board is the one in the middle. And Bill's is the board on the right. And it's interesting because there's 3 different offensive tackle ones. So Newt, Would you like to tell us why Kelvin Banks is your tackle one?
I would love to tell why Kelvin Banks is my tackle one. So Kelvin Banks, he was like flirting with tackle one. It was like 1A, 1B with him and Will Campbell going into the season. And for me, you're not going to see Will Campbell up here because I view him as a guard, but we're going to have that conversation. I know Owen's got him on his board, and I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had. But going into the season, I had Kelvin Banks probably 1B to Will Campbell's 1A. But what struck me really that I really loved about Kelvin Banks was his athleticism that he brings to the position. And I think this year he did everything that he needed to back that up. He showed his ability to get out in space and be a blocker on screen plays, as a pulling tackle, really whatever you need him to do in that Texas system. He posted a elite RAS score with an 8.31. He didn't like blow the top off, but anytime as an offensive lineman you're in that green that Kent Platt puts out, I'm more than happy with that. So all of those things where he's this athletic tackle, you know, they're really, really screaming to me, and it shows up for me in his pass sets. I think he's able to mirror edge rushers really well, and I think that he has the ability to match up with the speed that he's going to see at the NFL level. On top of that, he's a mauler. He seeks violence, and I think first time I ever heard that phrase was from Broshmo. He looks for violence and he takes advantage of it, and I love that. And there's a lot of guys in here, as I look through my ranking, that I kind of ding guys if they're not that mauler mentality. I don't think that's Kelvin Banks at all. He looks to finish a hit and go from there. He's got some deficiencies, obviously, with any player. His arm length actually came in a little bit better than I thought. I thought he was going to be right on 33 and a half is what he got measured in at. Now with all of the combine, pro day, senior bowl measurements kind of being, question marks thrown around, who knows at this point, but 33 and a half inch arms, I'm happy with that. But he does need to clean up his technique a little bit. With that over aggression, he tends to play a little bit out of control at times, can be wild with his hand placement. He has the understanding that he needs to get his hands into the chest of the defender and gain that control and command quickly, but sometimes he's not doing it in the most way, really. So a couple things that he didn't clean up with technique, but if your technique is the last thing that you need to clean up and everything else is stellar, you're going to shoot high up my board, and that's how he's shooting to be OT1 and a top 10 pick or a top 10 player on my board, I should say.
So, Newt, is the grade that you have on Banks good enough for New England to take him at 4th overall?
He's number 7 on my board. I wouldn't blink an eye if they took him at number 4. They need help along their line. I've seen Will Campbell going there a lot in mock drafts, which I'm not going to bat an eye at. I think Will Campbell has an argument to be made to be the best offensive lineman in this group. I still view Kelvin Banks that way because of the positional value that he brings as being a true left tackle. So I would say, yeah, absolutely. If he wants to start, if New England wants to start the conversation there, I think that's extremely appropriate. Now, I don't think he would, be looking earlier than that. And there's 2 guys named Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter that would guarantee that he probably doesn't go earlier than that. But, with the need that New England has and their lack of need for a quarterback, I think that is an appropriate starting place for him.
Cool. Owen, you have Josh Simmons as tackle 1, so Heather might like that. You want to tell us about Josh Simmons as tackle 1?
Yeah. Josh Simmons, so unfortunately, suffered that knee injury against Oregon, and you can see that was the last game I watched him, and I watched every snap of that game up until and saw what the injury was like, and it was one of those brutal ones, non-contact. You don't even really see what happens. He just plants and it goes. So hopefully he's able to recover. I know I don't know what the specifics of it is. Either Newt or Bill or Jim, if you guys know more specifically what he injured, but I think I'm pretty sure it's more severe than like a typical ACL tear, if I recall correctly.
It was a torn patellar tendon. So basically the tendon ripped off the patella.
Yeah, so brutal injury, and if he can recover, I'm on the train of most of the time injuries in college, especially for guys like Josh Simmons, who is not like one of these super old players. He's a 4-year junior, where he's going to be like 25, 26 in his rookie year. He's going to have some time to recover, and with the way modern science medicine is, I'm pretty confident he'll be able to come back. But as a player, He is my tackle one. Technically, I realized just now I made a mistake that because Will Campbell is higher up on my board than Josh Simmons is, but I have him graded as an interior offensive lineman for my big board. So I feel kind of okay that this is it and that I don't have Will Campbell as my offensive tackle one because that's just probably false. But talking about Simmons as a player, for me, he's just super dense. Like he is able to. My favorite thing watching him, and one of the things that when watching him, it was kind of like that oh shit moment. Like you're watching and you're like really enjoying something. Is his ability to just absorb contact through his body, and it's not like one of those guys who they really have to drop their hips and sink and absorb to get like those kind of shock absorbers in. He just is able to accept it and reroute it and play with the power while on the back pedal in his kick slide that a lot of guys really struggle with. And we'll get into some of those players that I think can struggle with that despite having size. Josh Simmons is built thick. He measured in at 6'5", 317, all muscles. No bad weight on his frame. He looks amazing. And outside of that, he plays with power. His footwork, I liked a lot. I think there's still some stuff with technique to clean up, specifically with his feet, and a little more with his hands as well. I don't think he plays with the greatest of lengths. He clears the 33-inch threshold, but he doesn't ever really play with length a lot, and that's kind of something that plays into. We had this conversation in an earlier podcast a couple of weeks ago when we were building up for the combine of how much the combine really impacts how you view guys. Watching a guy like Josh Simmons, if you would have told me he came in under that length threshold, I probably would have believed you because he just doesn't play with that level of length you really want to see. But since he cleared it, so that's good enough for some teams to be like, okay, we think we can get that out of him. We can pull it out of him more to play with more of that length that we know he does have. So I think there's room to grow with him technique-wise if he comes back healthy, and he's still this giant, powerful dude who's built like a brick. I already swore once. I won't swear again. But but he's powerful, can absorb that.
The PG-13 rating has already been put on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, if he does it again, we go to R at that point.
That's true.
I'm okay. There's a box on YouTube you check that says it's not suitable for kids. And I just checked that on every single one, and we're good. We're good. So
got it. Yeah, I don't think Simmons is gonna be for everybody. He's not Kelvin Banks with his tunnel screens out in the boundary and blowing dudes up at corner. He doesn't have that level of movement, but he can move dudes who are 100 pounds heavier than that with some of the same level of violence on the interior there. So I really love Simmons. I feel like he's the one guy. He is the only guy here that's a true offensive tackle that has a first round grade for me. So if he didn't get injured his knee, I'd be hammering the table for New England to take him at 4. But unfortunately, a team like Washington or one of these later teams that are going to need an offensive tackle are going to end up getting probably, in my opinion, obviously we haven't listed here, the best offensive tackle in the draft class much later than I think he should be going, especially with how limited the top of the talent pool is in this class.
So, Owen, do you think Josh Simmons could go 4 to New England?
It's tough because I feel like he has the talent to do so. If I was their GM, and this in a world where, and Bill, cover your ears, if the Browns take one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, and then the other one goes at 3 to the Giants, and you have Shedeur Sanders sitting there, you don't need a quarterback. You may want to take the bounty of someone moving up to 4 to grab him. And then move down and grab him there at 4 in a realistic world. If that happens and there's no one hammering to trade up for one of these quarterbacks with you at 4, I would maybe think about it. The knee injury kind of muddies that up a little bit and how severe that is, and then a lot of stuff plays into it. So I don't think it's on the table for them. If they're going to take on offensive lineman over another guy, I would say this is probably their best offensive lineman to take outside of like Will Campbell, but I do think tackle's a bit more of a need for them than interior guard right now. So yes, if I were them, I'd find a way to make it happen. But realistically, predictively, I don't think so, just because of a couple different factors pulling against them.
I want to pop off on what Owen said too, because when I was grading Josh Simmons was like I had a higher film grade on Josh Simmons than Kelvin Banks. I echo everything that Owen had said. I think I just factored that knee injury a little bit more. I lived through the David Bakhtiari years with the Packers, and I know David Bakhtiari was late 20s, early 30s, and there's a difference in age there that comes with that. But I look at a guy. Oh my God, I'm so bad with previous. Who was the Texas running back? Brooks. I look at Brooks, ACL tear again, and it's just like, it's there's something about a knee injury, and I know like a patellar tear is even worse than a standard ACL, where it just gives me a little bit of pause, and I think I'm a little bit more hesitant when it comes to that than really anything else. So I agree with everything Owen said. I think film-wise, Josh Simmons is the best offensive tackle in this year's draft. Personally, I'm hung up a little bit more on the injury because of the severity of it, and just a little bit of personal history being burned by those knee injuries.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, and
And
I
go ahead.
I was gonna say I echo everything as well, because if you look at my list, I have Armand Membu at 1 and Simmons at 2, but it is neck and neck on my board that Membu is 24th, Simmons is 25th. So they are right there, and it is just that patellar tendon, because you watched him at Ohio State. He looked every bit the part of a left tackle, and before that, when he was at Arizona State, he played right tackle, and he looked every bit the part of an NFL right tackle. So he could play either spot and not have any issues whatsoever. It's just that patellar tear. If your doctor's comfortable with it, take it. But if your doctor's not comfortable with it, he's going to slide.
Yeah,
Hey, Bill, if you have that patellar tear,
give me a minute.
I'll say,
If any listener wants to see some additional info on Josh Simmons, one of the first podcasts, I believe it was when I met Bill, we were doing a draft a team.
Mm-hmm.
And in October, Josh Simmons was the first tackle off the board when we did draft a team. And that was before he got hurt.
Yep.
So that's, Will Accidental Zen, that's Bill, that's me, that's Randall. And there were probably a few others on that podcast, but all of us had Josh Simmons as tackle 1 in October. It's the injury is what's pushing Simmons down.
Yes.
So
yeah, I was gonna say, Bill, what if in a world where his film is the same throughout the entirety of the season that it was in the first 4 games, 5 games, whatever, where do you think he would be on your board in terms of tackles?
If the film
or, I'm sorry,
same,
on your boards in terms of players, not tackles, your overall big board.
So my overall big board, my first offensive lineman is 11th overall, and that's Will Campbell, and I have him graded as a guard. And my second offensive lineman, Jonas Savanea, graded as a guard as well, but could play tackle. If all in all considered he was fully healthy, he would be a top 10 guy on my board.
Okay. So, Bill, you have Armand Membu as tackle 1. You want to tell us about him?
Yeah, so Armand Membu, Missouri. I mean, this guy is an athletic freak. You just look at his RAS score at a 9.89, 17th among all offensive tackles since 1987. Every bit the part. But not only is he athletic, he's just got this body control that allows him to mirror pass rushers with ease. Like, he looks like every bit the part of a dancing bear when he's out there on that right side. But he also handles blitzes and stunts very easily with a veteran savvy like nobody's business. This guy is every bit the part of a true left tackle. Now, he played right tackle at Missouri, so you have the question mark, can he flip over to the other side? One of the things that I look for if I'm moving from right side to left side is that athleticism, because you can easily learn to mirror things. What you can't learn is how to handle those finesse rushers that are going to be on that left side, and Membu can do that. And he also is just a nasty finisher, probably the nastiest finisher of any tackle in this class. And right now on my board, he's 24th overall. That's just due to the talent that's above him. My comp for him, because obviously I'm the comp king, Jason Peters when he was in Philly. The exact same thing that Jason Peters did in Philly, Armand Membu. If I were New England, regardless of if Abdul Carter falls or Travis Hunter falls, you need a blindside protector for Drake May. I would take him 4th overall and not blink.
Cool. And you have Ursery as tackle 3, Bill. And you have Ursery higher than Newt or Owen. So what do you like about Ursery that you have him at tackle 3?
Yeah, so with Ursery, the big thing, this is a guy that's just a really big offensive tackle when you look at him when it's all said and done. And I know that there's a lot of question marks around the fact in his pass he plays too uptight and plays too upright. and he loses leverage way too easily, but he just has this natural anchor against power rushers. He's not moving. He is like the immovable object. Forces will hit him, but he's not going anywhere. He's got a really explosive first step off of the snap and can easily get to that point in a hurry and just plant his feet and not worry about it. His game reminds me a lot of Colton Miller when he was at UCLA. That same style of just to get to the spot quick, sit there, and let everything come to me easily. In addition to that, he once started 38 straight games. In a world where offensive tackles are consistently beat up and consistently broken down, and in Cleveland especially, where I have 2 offensive tackles that can't stay healthy, being able to start that many games is a big plus in my book, because the best ability anybody can have, it's not athleticism, it's not hand placement, it's not anchor, it's availability. And if I can't trust my tackle to be healthy, I can't trust him at all, which is why Josh Simmons is second on my board. It's why Ariante Ursary is a little bit higher on my board, but I have him as a left tackle.
Cool. And Owen, you're the highest on Will Campbell. What do you like about Campbell that you have him as offensive tackle too?
Yeah, so I usually, whenever I have these guys that I'm unsure about how I split their grading between offensive tackle and interior offensive line, I typically will go and grade them both at the same time with both my criterias and just see which one pops up the higher grade. At offensive tackle, he came out as my OT2. At interior offensive lineman, he's my 8th overall player on my board. So he is a great interior offensive lineman. I think the conversation around his arm length and him saying that people didn't question his arm length until the combine came out, and then the people got the number, and then they started like, no, I watched the first game of his film and I was like, okay, he plays a little tall, and he has some arm length questions. If he's able to fire out from a 3-point stance more often, and he doesn't have as much space to work with, I think he'd work a lot better. But as an offensive tackle, I still think he works functionally. I do think he has the athleticism. He has all the other intangibles. He is a high technique player that I do think if you put him, he's one of those guys that if you put him off tackle, you're not going to hate it. But his most successful position for me personally is at guard. And it's why, like, if he gets past New England at 4, if they end up taking one of the defensive players in Carter or Hunter, and he starts to fall and he lands up in a place like Chicago, if they choose him over like a Genty, or Genty's not even there anymore, that's a great place for him for me, because you have a guy already there and established with Braxton Jones, who I like coming out of Southern Utah, but like isn't a world beater in the slightest. So you can have him there. They can push each other for a left tackle, and then at the same time you have a player who, in Will Campbell, that if he doesn't win that left tackle job, because you trust that Braxton Jones is going to win that left tackle job, you are not worried in the slightest to kick Campbell inside and have him be your starting guard on top of that. So I think he's a guy that can come out and be an offensive tackle. I don't know if he's like a top 10 offensive tackle player, or I think he's a top 10 interior offensive lineman player. But you can draft him top 10 as a guard, and I'd be totally fine with it. But at the same time, I think he's still a solid, good first round player at offensive tackle.
I like that. I was gonna say, like, so for me, I've got, if I'm looking at my board, Will Campbell is player number 12 on my board. Yeah, I have him as a guard. He's still, top 15 guy for me. I think I'm in the same camp as Bill and Owen, where it's like this guy's a legit offensive lineman that can completely change the system. I think Peter Skronsky has been brought up a ton when talking about Will Campbell, a guy with shorter arms, but is just dominant at that position. It's probably going to slide in the NFL. I really, really like him. So I like that shout out and being able to talk about him. So like I had Josh Connerly Jr. as number 4 on my board. I had number 4 on my board. I'm sorry. Armand Membu had 3. I think Bill covered him, hit him perfectly. Josh Connerly Jr. for me is a guy that you hear about the athleticism. You hear about like this guy being a freak in terms of what he's able to do. The packages that Oregon put together this year for him, kind of the special way that he plays the game. And there's a lot of gimmicky things that go into that, you can do at collegiate ball and are never going to translate, like him throwing the ball or whatever. And, maybe you'll see a pass out of Josh Connolly Jr. one time in the NFL, one time. But the athleticism, in my opinion, shows up very well. I think that he gets out into space really, really well. I liked him on the move. I think, once again, he's a guy for me in the same vein as Calvin Banks Jr., that he's able to get into his pass sets, get into his kick slides really well because of that athleticism, because he's a smooth mover and he's a smooth athlete. It doesn't look awkward for him. It doesn't look lumbering. And it's something that for him, he's able to pair that explosion off the line in terms of, both forward and backward, laterally and in a straight line, as well as like the speed and the quickness to do so. Where Connolly kind of like, falls for me because, I talk about those things and it's really, really great. Where I have him as a fringe, he's not a true first round grade for me. He's a fringe first round. And he's almost more really like a second round grade for me. I don't love him as a run blocker. There were a handful of reps that I saw him where he went and he lowered his shoulder like he was a defensive player trying to just knock a guy down. And to me, I was like, what are we doing here? Like you're a really, really premier tackle in college football. How to play the game. You're solid in your technique a lot of times. And in run blocking, it just kind of died and it faded off. And I was a little turned off by it, truth be told. I had to kind of like recenter myself in that. But that was one thing that I really, really did not like for him was his like approach to the run game. And he's a mauler. I talked about that already. Like I like a guy that's got a physical mentality, but like his technique just completely went away and he wasn't looking to latch on to guys. He was just looking to hit a guy and make that large pancake just with his shoulder. I think he's a guy that has that opportunity to, and the ability to. Hell, I tweeted out a clip, and I know Owen had saw it on Twitter. Him just like literally slapping one of the UCLA defenders to the side, get out in space, and just clearing away for the slot receiver. It was an amazing clip, and like it's just like that's what I need, man. Like use your hands. You're that good of a player where you can do this. But like right now, he doesn't do that from time to time, and it is frustrating. And I might have dinged him even a little bit more than I wanted to personally. I really like him, but there's just some things that kind of give me reservation for that. If he was as good in run blocking as he was in pass pro, he'd be easy top 15 grade for me because I think he's that good in pass protection, and I really like the athleticism that he brings to the position. And then, Jim, you wanted me to hit on Anthony Belton?
Yeah, so Drew is going to love the fact that you have Anthony Belton this high. Like, Anthony Belton just doesn't get enough love, according to Drew. But tell the world about Anthony Belton, Newt.
Yeah. So I got Ariante Ursary, and I echo a lot of things that Bill had said to me. He was kind of like, it was just he gets the job done. He's kind of clunky. I don't know. That was the word that I always wanted to keep using. But like he's effective. And then I go one more spot down and I'm at Anthony Belton. And so I rewatched all of these guys for this exercise. Most of them I had already given either an early season film grade 2 or, a couple of them a little bit later on. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go in fresh. I'm going to watch all of these guys. Anthony Belton I had as like a 4th round grade going into this. I watched again. I was like, this guy's good. Like he's doing everything that I'm looking for out of a top 50 talent. His frame is solid. Like it helps having those measurables and a little bit of affirmation there. 6'6", 336, 33 and 7/8 inch arms. Like check. You love to see that there. Maybe a little bit more power out of him. You talk about a bench press at 20. It's like, okay, it could be a little bit better there. But I love some of the other elements that come into his game, especially like his short shuttle and some other things in terms of like his quickness. And I think it shows up really, really well in his pass protection. And that's really where I fell in love with him. Where I talk about Josh Connolly Jr. Why I like him is because of that athleticism and the ability that it gives him to be a high-end pass protector. I don't think Anthony Belton is, a ton different. I think he's a better pass protector than Arianti Ursary, who I just, mentioned. He gets the job done. It doesn't look sexy. Like, nothing about Ursary's game looks good, but it's effective to a point. Anthony Belton looks good when he's doing it. He's a really, really good mover, given the fact that he's 6'6". I think that he has a solid anchor, and he's able to really, really latch on to guys, especially, when he's able to get his hands on. I love his ability to sustain blocks. I think that he does, once again, he's another guy that technique is going to come into play. That's going to be the mantra of a lot of these guys. But there are some things when I start to look at him in run blocking, it's even more than Connerly Jr. Connerly Jr. had a mean streak to him. Anthony Belton, he doesn't have that drive when he moves downhill. I want him to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more of a mauler. I want him to have that. I'm gonna hit the shit out of you, and you're gonna lie there, and I'm gonna remind you of that about 10 more times this game, and I'm excited about that. He just doesn't quite have that to me, and while it's a pass heavy league, I still think that there's a lot of elements that come into it where you gotta be, you can be a great guy and the nicest guy in the world when you're off the field, but the minute that ball is hiked, you got to be looking for violence once again. And I don't quite think he moves downhill, whether it's an explosive factor or it's just his mentality, not wanting to miss on a blocker or whatever it may be. I want to see him move downhill a little bit better. So his little bit of lack of effectiveness in the run game kind of drove me down from him. I still have a second round grade on him. I really like Anthony Belton. If a team took him in, the between 50 and 60, I'd be like, sweet. That's exactly where I saw it. If the Packers came back and they took Anthony Belton, I'd be like, you know what? I can live with this. I like this. We're getting a really solid player that is able to kind of fill out our locker room.
So, Owen, you have Ozzie Trapilo as tackle 6, and Brandon in the chat is talking about Ozzie Trapilo to the Texans. So what do you like about Trapilo?
Yeah. So real quick, I want to throw about this question I had earlier when I was listening to Bill talk about Armand Membu. So while you guys can chew on this, while I'm going down talking about one of my favorite offensive tackles I got to watch that I had zero expectation for it before coming into this exercise. But was there any one player that boosted their stock with a 40-yard dash at the combine more than Armand Membu in his sub 540 as big as he was? I'll let you guys sit on that one. I'll dive into Ozzie Trapilo and then a little bit on touching on Chase Lund. With Trapilo, again, he was another guy that I had no expectations coming into this. He was on the list of the NFL Combine website pretty high up, and I think that's DJ's rankings, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So he was someone I was like, okay, I'm not really hearing a ton about this guy. DJ likes him. DJ's super respected in the space. So I'm like, I'm going to throw him on my list. I basically went down. That was how I kind of selected guys to watch. And coming out of it, he's one of the guys that if the Patriots don't take a guy at 4 and they wrap around and take Trapilo at the top of the second round because they have some connections with Boston College, with currently Bill O'Brien's a coach there, and it's in Massachusetts area, I could definitely get on board with that because Trapilo is technically one of the best players in this grouping. I love his ability to mirror, his ability to use his arms to hand fight, reset, and be able to keep his chest clean despite not having the greatest of length. I don't think he plays with phenomenal length, and his grip strength is less than ideal to hold on to blocks. So I think that's what holds him back for me and why he's not higher. I think he could have genuinely been knocking on the door of a first-round guy I've been banging the table for if he just played with a little more length, a little more strength in his hands. But outside of that, his footwork and his hand technique outside of that is amazing. He isn't a massive people mover like we talk about with a guy like Seven or you talk about with a guy like Kelvin Banks or Anthony Belton. He's not going to be one of those absolute road graders. But he does just enough that you're like, that's fine with it. His movement skills are awesome for being 6'8", 310 plus. He's able to fly around and get up to that second level, reach blocks. I love his movement skills, and he has just enough power that, like, if you are going to run a lot of double teams and try to work him up to the second level through some combo blocks, I think that'll be where he excels the most. But even then, there were some plays where he was able to neutralize on down blocks and to not get absolutely, like, he did his job. He did his 111th. It was serviceable enough that I didn't think it was this absolutely massive negative towards his game. So I think he does everything either good or to a higher level. I just think that if he was a little bit longer and played a little bit of stronger hands, I'd be banging on the table for this guy in the back half of that first. And then to touch on, or go ahead.
So I was going to say, how high is Trapilo on your board, Owen?
Trapilo, I just reset my number counting. He's player number 40 on my board right now, with a true second round grade.
Bill, what do you got, Trapilo? I'll say you're a Trapilo guy.
I'm with it. I've got him 45th, so I'm right there with Owen.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, he's your classic. He's going to be a high floor. Like, you need a starting tackle. If you're not looking for Trent Williams, you're looking for a guy who can come in, and because you have a hole there, you're drafting Trapilo, and you're coming out of the draft happy, and you think you got your tackle situation fine moving forward from that point on, and then he can potentially grow with some technique improvements further with that. And then you want me to touch on Lunt?
Yes,
Jim?
please. Yes.
Yeah, so I didn't do the full analysis on Lunt for this just because he was kind of further on the board, and I was trying to find and pick and choose some guys that I either had already watched because of interior offensive linemen like Carson Vincent and Jack Nelson, who are lower on my board, or guys who were going to be towards that top 150 that we talk about here on the Draft Professor. So I didn't hit Lunt in my watch through for this specifically, but I have watched in the past. We game planned for them. UB through UConn, so I did get a look at him. I watched the UB UConn game live and then watched it back again just to get a sense of how our D-line worked in that. So I'm familiar with Lunt's game. For him, I'm not the biggest fan of his. I do think he showed steps. I went back, and part of what I was learning about with him, other than watching this year's tape, was learning about his past years, because he was this lower recruited 2-star guy. He wasn't super highly touted, but he worked his way into becoming a starter, and he improved technically and got to that point where they were confident to play him on a UConn offensive line. That he probably wasn't initially slotted to even be like an impact guy for them. He was probably going to be seen as more of a depth spot starter, and he eventually worked his way in there. And he's great on the move. He's got some good lateral ability. I do think he has the necessary athleticism to get depth, but I'm not sure his length and ability to hold up against stronger pass rushers. Like, if he went against Michael Williams, I don't know how much. It's not going to be a fun day in the office for him. Let me just put it that way. He came in, I believe, under the 33-inch arm length. I haven't double checked that, but I believe he has under the threshold, and it looks like it when he's playing. There's some guys that you can kind of ignore it a little bit, but for him, I don't think that's something that you can really look past. And when you're already thinking about that, and then the measurements come in to confirm that, you're already thinking about moving him inside. He's got to be more of like a zone-heavy, scheme-specific interior blocker. He's not the most powerful guy, so being an interior blocker doesn't really bode well either. So he's kind of in this weird spot for me where I think he's going to do best as a guard, and if you're going to want to plug him in there, you need to have a very specific scheme, and even then, I don't know how high of a starting caliber player he's going to get in those specific schemes, if a starter at all, for me personally.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that because – and I want to because he's built the literal opposite of how you want an offensive lineman to be built. You want a guy to have some height to him, but truth be told, I would prefer an offensive tackle that's more maybe 6'5", hell, even 6'4" versus 6'7", 6'8", because you have the leverage advantage. But I want the long arms that come with the longer body. That's where an Amram Membu is amazing. He's 6'4", 6'5", but he's got vines for arms. Lunt is 6'7.5", and he's got 32 and 5/8 inch arms. And it's dude, you're killing me. You're number one, you're light, because he came in at 304. he has a ton of height and these like small arms. So it's like, just like you said, you want to move him inside because the arm length maybe, or, the ability for him to like move in space in a zone heavy scheme. But there's just so many things that are like working against him. And I think he's built in such an odd fashion where it really makes it hard to place him. Like, where along the offensive line are you going to lie? And like we can point to Jack Nelson, because I know, Owen, me and you have had that conversation a fair amount now. Like, Jack Nelson, I think, could still make it as a tackle. I don't think he's going to be a starting tackle per se, but I think that he's got the ability to be that sixth offensive lineman. Now, with that being said, and we'll get into Jack Nelson conversation later, he's got 33.5-inch arms. He's got the amount of mass that you might want to see out of the position. Like, where like Lunt, I just feel like there's so many things that are like the polar opposite of what you'd want out of a tackle for him.
Yeah, I just checked it. I just pulled up his mock draft pool. He's in the 95% percentile with his height, with 6'7.5", but he's in the 23rd with his weight, 10th with his wingspan, 21st arm length, and 26th with his hand size. I don't think he's nearly as bad as this guy was, because this is my guy. I'll parade around as my lowest drafted or lowest graded player I've ever had, and the only reason why I bring him up so often in day-to-day conversations because the Bills ended up drafting him, and I was heartbroken. It was Luke Tenuta out of Virginia Tech, which I don't remember what his specific arm length was or how he measured in, but he was an absolute T-Rex. Like, he was 6'7", 6'8", and he played like he was 6'2", and he got bullied. He had some movement, but like, no, I don't think he really, like, he wasn't anything. Like I said, he's the lowest graded player I've ever watched in my time watching film over the past like 6 years. He just was a guy that kind of fit that same mold where it was like, why? What do we do with you? Like, 6'8", 32 7/8. He went to the Bills in the 6th round, and that was like if you just took that pick and set it on fire there. So I mean, Blunt isn't that bad, but that's kind of the archetype you're looking at of a guy who got picked by the Bills in the 6th round, didn't make it out of camp, and I haven't heard anything about him since. I saw him. His picture had a Packers jersey on. Newt, I don't know if he's done anything for the Packers at all, but he just was somebody that I did not see any projectable way he could be an NFL offensive tackle or even an offensive lineman in general, because he was already 6'8", and Lunt is bordering on that with what his measurables are saying, regardless of how good I think he is lateral movement wise or some of the other things he does good in his play style.
Cool. So, Bill, you have Holland Pierce at 6, and then after we got through this, I realized out of the three of you, you're the highest on Trapilo. So you said Trapilo for you is 45 on your big board?
Yeah, 44th. Yeah.
Nice. So tell us about Holland Pierce and how far of a drop is there from Trapilo to Pierce?
Yeah, so with Holland Pierce, the big thing is this is a guy that has his own gravitational pull with how large he is. At 6'8", 341, he is a mountain of a man. But when you see larger guys like that, normally the issue is they, try to just overpower and tower over people like a skyscraper. And he doesn't do that. He stays very disciplined in his sets. When he's down blocking, it is downright comical. It's like watching a small child at the carnival carry around a giant stuffed teddy bear, the way he picks defensive linemen up and pushes them downfield. He really has good awareness with stunts and blitzes. This is a guy that's very well aware of his surroundings, very good football IQ. The biggest problem that he has is he's so large that once he commits to outside, an inside counter is going to take his soul. He cannot get back to that inside side. That being said, this is a guy that, by all accounts, is a very capable right tackle in the NFL. I would put him on the right side, but I would need to make sure that I have a very athletic right guard next to him that can pick up those inside counters, because if I leave him out there on an island, it's going to be problematic. The good news is with him being a right tackle, he's going to face more power than he is finesse. Obviously, some teams will circle that on the scouting report, move that finesse edge to that side. But he's kind of like, I look at him and I comp him to how Patrick Paul was coming out of Houston. The same things that we saw with Patrick Paul, struggled with inside rushes. He was a little bit smaller than a little bit smaller than Pierce was. But those same kind of concepts, when you have a larger guy like that, he struggles to maintain his bend. And a lot of times it's bending at the waist rather than the legs, giving up that unnecessary leverage. But this is a guy, a just mountain of a man, brings his brawler's mentality to the run game and just has a really consistent base and pass protection. A lot of times the bigger guys, their feet speed, it's just a little slow, so they kind of trip up on themselves. I didn't see that with Pierce. Now, all that being said, Pierce is still, he's firmly in my top 100 right now, and I would put him at 53rd overall right now. So the drop off between Trapilo and Pierce is about 10 picks. So not that much of a major drop off. Both of them would be NFL right tackles. Trapilo, I can get by with an average guard play next to him. Pierce is going to need a running buddy to that right side, to that left side of him, that right guard position that can help pick up the slack.
Bill, I want to bug you a little bit about this because So number one, you didn't mention the most important thing about Pierce, the neck roll that he wears that makes him look even more larger, of a mammoth of a man. Like this man's already 6'8", and he's got a neck roll on top of it, and it's just like, right, what are we doing here?
Right.
So I put this film on, and I was watching it on my TV. I had to watch broadcast film for it, and my wife walked by it, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm watching film for left tackle out of Rutgers," and she's like, "Who is it?" I was like, "Look at the biggest guy on the screen." She's like, "Oh, okay," and like it's immediate, like you can see right away. Yeah. It's like, holy hell, this guy is so much bigger than everyone else. Even next to like the entire offensive and defensive line. And I think I was watching like Virginia Tech. It was watching a Virginia Tech game. Like this guy is a mammoth.
We might need to do a podcast where your wives come on and they pretend to scout.
Yeah.
Just, like for April Fools next year.
I don't know if you'd be able to get mine on.
Yeah.
But so like I say that I'm watching this guy and I'm like, God, this man is huge. But like, so for me, the biggest thing that I know right away, and it is totally a detriment of how big he is just he's got to bend over for everything, and he's dipping his head for literally everything. And it's not that he's not like, I think he's got a little bit of flexibility. He's like, to me, he kind of like, he had shades of Ursary, where it's like a little bit of like inflexibility, and he had that like kind of clunky, kick slide to him, but he's 6'8", and like I get it, but he's just got to go down so far to meet everyone. And it felt like there were so many times where he had to like literally dip his head just to get to the defender, that like he almost took himself like his awareness out of the play. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You see that a lot, especially on his tape, because, I mean, look at the measurements. He was 96th percentile or higher on everything except for hand size, height, weight, arm length, and wingspan. So he's a mountain of a man. But I saw that on tape. There were a lot of times, and it especially happened more when he was fatigued late in games, because obviously you're carrying 340 pounds. It's going to wear on you. And you see it a lot towards the end of the third and the fourth quarter, where you definitely see him kind of just dragging his head, and it's concerning. It's going to be the first thing, if he gets in an offensive line room, that they've got to coach out of him, is how to be able to use that height to his advantage. But for me, in my grading scale, I would rather have the option to be able to coach that issue out than try to coach someone up who doesn't meet a height threshold.
I like that. I have him I have him really close to Jack Nelson. Those guys are similar in height. Actually, I've got him sandwiched between Jack Nelson and Jalen Travis, which is funny because all those guys are huge. I think Jack Nelson is kind of like vanilla, where Holland Pierce, I think like you get the really high and the really low with him, where like you're either going to get this guy that is just a stud or a guy that just can't figure it out. So like if you're looking at the high, I totally get that, Bill. And I can see like just everything about him where it's like, man, yeah, absolutely. Let's pop that guy up there because he's an eraser. He's a literal eraser.
Yeah, 100%. And he's not going to be for everybody. You know, if you have a zone heavy scheme, you're not going to take a Holland Pierce. It's got to be a gap scheme, a power scheme where you can just kind of force him in there and just let him move people around and just push them left and right.
Yeah. So, Owen, you have something you want to add about the athleticism?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is more a question for the general podcast here, and it has to do with a lot of the guys we've talked about so far, whether it's Ursary or it's Membu or Banks. And it's how do you guys analyze athleticism in these tackles? Specifically, like, we get a guy like Membu who tests out the charts and is super outstanding for all of these different athletic traits, and he's doing it at this massive size, which is awesome. But at what point is there you're so good of an athlete, there's like I'm trying to think of the wording for it. It's less of a return on your investment per how much higher and higher up a level of athlete you are. For me, like I look at for tackles, I don't really see the athleticism or the arm length as something that's like always a big plus that sets a ceiling. More so, it's more of a threshold to break barrier past. And then if you get past that, maybe if you're a little more towards the upper echelon, it helps you a lot. But at a certain point, there's diminishing returns of the word I'm looking for. There's a diminishing returns for how much more athletic. Armand Membu being as athletic as he is fantastic, and it's amazing for him as a player. But if he's 20% more of an athlete than the next guy, but that other guy is still good enough an athlete to get depth, flip his hips, can run and seal. Like I'm not worried about him athletically at all, projecting him to the NFL as a tackle. Just because our Membu's a better athlete, I don't know if that adds for me personally much more to him ceiling wise when it comes to tackles. So I was just curious how you guys felt about the athleticism in tackles and how much that impacts what players or how much of a ceiling that sets for the player, or if that's how you differentiate from guys. Because at some point you're like, he's a good athlete. You take your flavor of good athlete, but at some point you can only be so good of an athlete that it no longer starts impacting you, especially at like offensive tackle. There's other positions I think it does impact more, and we could have that discussion that's a whole podcast. You could talk about athleticism relative to positions for scouting, but I think tackle is one of those ones where I don't really see it as a ceiling setter. I see it more as a threshold to pass.
So I want to take this one first. I really like this, and it's because of the way that I view Arianti Ursary. And once again, I use the word clunky. I want to shout out Dom C. Like me and him were talking about Ursary on Twitter a couple weeks back, and I loved what Dom said about him. He said I'm sorry, I'm going to quote him exactly. He's uber athletic, but really stiff at the same time. And it's like, you nailed it, man. Like, he doesn't look good when he gets into his pass sets. Like it's so odd. And it's like, it's robotic and it's not like smooth. Like it's very chunky and it doesn't seem like it works, but it works for Ursary. And like for him, it's able to get the job done. And he played Big Ten ball. He played really well against really good edge rushers, and he was able to display that. And I think only to the point that you're making, I think that makes a ton of sense for there. Like Ursary does not look good when he plays offensive tackle, but he's athletic enough to get the job done. And like you go up then to a next level, like a Josh Connerly or an Armand Membu, where it's like the athleticism is dripping from them. And like they look sexy while doing it. They're big men in an unsexy job that like make it look sexy. But like the returns for like that jump are very like a lot smaller in regards to that. So Owen, I think like what you're saying with that, like put the alarms on. Like I agree with Owen here. I think he's got something to what he's saying. It's crazy for me to say.
Yeah, we're not talking about Ibuka, so apparently you agree.
Make sure we clip that. Newt and Owen agreeing on something. No, I think Owen hit the nail on the head. At a certain point, you have to say how much athleticism masks things in their games that are concerning. You know, if I have two prospects that are top 100 guys and one looks really athletic and then one has really great mechanics but looks kind of clunky, how much do I have to value that athleticism to overlook bad footwork or overlook bad hand placement, things like that? So that there has to be a guideline somewhere. But nowadays in the NFL, with things being more spread out now than they have been in the past, especially with passing games, especially with screen games, moving left to right and trying to get in space, for me personally, I want as much athleticism as I can get, because ultimately I can fix mechanics, I can fix footwork, I can fix hand placement. I cannot fix if you are a piss poor athlete. There goes the PG-13 rating. And that's what I look for, and that's what I value. So I agree with both of you guys, but for me, there has to be not only some sort of threshold, but the more athleticism I can get, the better. Because if I'm an offensive line coach, I prefer a guy with a raw moldable clay who's a really great athlete, and I can teach him and improve on some of the things. Now, not every team's going to be that way. Not every team's going to have a Bill Callahan or a Stoutland as their offensive line coach. So they may need to go with that guy that's got the better mechanics. But all things considered, if all 32 teams had serviceable or even competent O-line coaches, give me the better athlete, because I can work on those mechanics and footwork and fundamentals.
Yeah, and I think specifically for me, like, when I say, like, that's why I like to think of it as a threshold thing. Whereas, like, if I can get a guy who can get out to the tunnel screen and bowl up the cornerback in a timely manner, versus a guy like I love Josh Simmons, but that's not his bread and butter. Same thing with like Anthony Belton or some of these other guys we've talked about, who I love their tape. But, you got to utilize them correctly. But you got a guy like Membu, you got a guy like Ursary. You have some guys that can get out into space like that and make those bigger hits and be big of impacts on the screen game or on pulling out in front as pullers and being lead blockers for running backs and being able to keep pace with them and not holding your guys back. That's definitely a skill set and a thing you want to prioritize, and that'll bump guys up your board, no doubt. I just think, like, when you're looking at, and we'll parlay this into one of the guys that we haven't talked about yet on our boards here, with Charles Grant. Charles Grant is a great athlete for his size, and I think can do some of those things about getting out in space and working that and doing some of the stuff that Armand Membu does. And I feel like the only thing that differentiates Membu from Grant for me, well, outside of like level of competition, the fact that whenever I was watching these Texas A&M edge rushers, I was like, well, I got to watch some Zoo game, and then they get locked up by Membu, and I'm like, well, okay, he's a stud. Besides that, and instead of watching Stony Brook film, I outside of that difference, the difference for them is that I think Membu is more well-rounded when it comes to he's got a higher floor technically already, and he has more functional utilization of his strength at a higher level of competition that makes you more confident to translate right away. So, like, I start looking at that stuff, and I look at him. And what I think really truly sets a ceiling is, and it's not something you can really get from tape unless you watch all of their years and all their games, but like their coachability and ability to continue to develop their technique is where you're going to get your ceiling. Because once you crack that threshold of being like, okay, I can move, I can get out in space, I can be lead blocker, I can be a tunnel screen guy, I can get depth in my set, I can check all the boxes athletically that you want. That's where it's like, okay, I'm going to stop looking to see if your 40 time is a 5'10" or a 4'9'8". It's awesome for the combine viewership, and that's why I threw out that question earlier about who really got better like publicity than Membu when they're 40 this year. Usually it's a wide receiver, but this time it was like a 330-pound offensive tackle, because that makes people notice you and notice how good of an athlete you are as like a common viewer. But like outside of the fact that he got noticed because of that, what if he ran a 5.10? I wouldn't think any lesser of him as like an athlete. He already checked that box for me. So like, is the fact that he tested so much higher than like what other people in the past have tested really change how I feel about him as an athlete, as a tackle? I still think he's an elite athlete as a tackle. I didn't need to see him do those kinds of drills and testing to make me change my mind or give me a better development of that. I then start looking at what is he doing technically, what is he doing outside of the athleticism to make him more of a high ceiling guy or someone who can progress more. And that's where like Charles Grant, like he's at 9 for me, because I think he's a great athlete and he has that power and he dominated his level of competition. But then you also see like he holds a lot. He had 6 different penalties. All of them were holding this past season. And at the same time, because he's grabbing on the outside and he's trying to control dudes through their shoulder pads and not their chest. You see a lot of reps where you know that they're like, you see the athletic talent, you got to pull that out of them. Whereas Membo, I think it's a lot more of a linear pathway to pull that out of it and match the athletic talent with technique wise. So that's where I think your ceiling gets pulled out of more so. And that's why I think like athleticism is really more of like a threshold to break past. And then once you get past that threshold, I stop caring how much of a greater athlete you are than the next guy who's also past that threshold.
Owen, the soapbox was well done. I loved it. That was really well said, man. Like, no, jokes aside, like I
so
think
Owen,
really
you
well.
should let everybody know how they can find more of your content. Like that's
look at Jim rolling into it. God, you host
Just
podcasts?
Seamless.
Just segues.
I have gifts. Owen.
Yes, so I am currently posting a lot on Twitter. It's been ramping up the draft season over at the Weekly Huddle on Twitter. Jim mentioned it earlier before we started this. I have a YouTube channel at Weekly Huddle where I also post draft content. I do have I haven't posted like genuine videos outside of like these live streams to my feed quite a bit since like the beginning of the NFL season. But I have a couple in the tank talking about specifically what I just was talking about here. I have another video I want to make about players that are like edge rushers that are going to be transition from linebacker to edge. Like we have an Abdul Carter, Olufemi Oladejo, even a guy like a Josiah Stewart who plays that hybrid role and how that kind of impacts them and unlocking some of that stuff. So I have some stuff I have planned to go up this month, try to capitalize on that. And I'm also going to I plan on it anyway on that channel streaming for live on day 2 of the draft, rounds 2 and 3, giving live reactions. I put out an open invitation to all the professors and all some of the other guys I've worked with in the past. So we might have a cast of characters coming through and giving their takes and stuff. We'll have a fun night there. So that's where you can find all my work there.
Cool. Newt.
So you can find me on mostly like literally just come here Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Like you'll hear everything I need to say. But aside from that, X at NFL Draft _Weston. I have just over this last week and I was thinking back to it too. Like, man, I haven't because so step back. I also run zerotechdraft.com, and that has been kind of my outlet for posting my big board, live mock drafts, and article write-ups for players. And I really haven't had an opportunity to post to there lately, mostly number one. Me and my wife had a lovely vacation in Jamaica, which was amazing. And it looks like Jim and Owen were able to get through a week without me, which is wonderful. But like number 2, I was thinking about it, and like I just this week alone, like not having put anything up there, like I just finished up the Combine Pro Day spreadsheet that I've been working on for a couple weeks. Posted that to Twitter. Anyone wants to take advantage of that, it's pinned to my page. Please go check it out. I think people have found it helpful. It's been kind of like my little pet project during this last 2 weeks. I actually got shouted out by Kyle Long. That was probably the coolest thing that happened to me this week. Was Kyle Long shouted me out. He's like, "Hey man, you made my day with this comment." And I was like, "Kyle Long, I hated you when you played in the league because you were a Bear. But dear God, are you an amazing podcaster? You were hilarious." And I literally started listening to Pushing the Pile after that. It was amazing. And then yesterday, actually, the Cheesehead TV draft guide went live. And behind me, I've got my first posted NFL draft write-up that was published, and I'm so stoked about it. So like this week, like I was like, I haven't done anything on Zero Tech, and it's like, holy heck, you've had so many other things happen. This has been really cool. So that's a long way of explaining what Jim had just asked, but like find me on Twitter, yes. But like Cheesehead TV Draft Guide, ZeroTechDraft.com, here Thursdays, all of it has been, kind of where my thoughts have been flowing out. And it's, what are we? 21 days. Heck, oh my God, we're 3 weeks. We're 3 weeks from the draft. It's a good time to be a fan of the draft. So subscribe, follow at NFL Draft Fanatic on YouTube, Twitter. No I in Fanatic. Mrs. Irrelevant podcast coming at you daily. What now? 2 times a day, Jim? Is that where we're at? 2 times a day. We're bringing everything that you could want. So, guys, it's a good time to be a fan of the draft.
Yeah.
Newt,
So
I'm checking out
because there's 3 people for Cheesehead TV Guide that are draft professors.
Heck yeah. So Dom C.
Newt was the only one that put it in their bio.
Yeah.
Other 2 didn't admit to it in their bio.
Hell no. This is what. So this podcast right here is what got me to Cheesehead TV. I gotta give my dues where they are. This is like, we're gonna talk like Jim's out here. He's the scout of podcasters. Like he's finding everyone, wherever he can. Heck yeah, I put that in my bio. That was amazing. Shout out to Dom C and Brian Maffey, 2 other draft professors that were able to contribute to the Cheesehead TV Draft Guide. So, Bill, you have to top that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but I'm sure going to try. You can find me on X at Spark Scouting. All of my tweets, takes, and everything will be there. But my written work is over at the Right Way Sports Network, and that's TWSN.net. I actually just had a scouting report go up a little bit ago on Thor Griffith from Louisville, and I've got one coming tomorrow morning for Marcus Bowe from Purdue, since we're talking O-line. I'm glad Newt shouted out Dom C because he's also over there with me as well at the Right Way Sports Network on TWSN.net. And of course, you can catch me here with the Draft Professors on Wednesday nights at 8:30 with Jacob Roach, Roachism 13. He won't be with us next week, but next Wednesday, Jim's going to put me on the spot and allow people to throw tomatoes at me and give me the hook with a mock the mock scenario, which will be fun. But like Newt said, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell, drop us a comment. If you like what we're saying, tell us. If you hate what we're saying, tell us. Tag your friends, tag your enemies, tag your grandma who's never used YouTube before, create her a channel and let her comment. We appreciate everybody that's watching. We appreciate all the people that tune in and allow us to do this. Like Newt said, we are 3 weeks from the NFL draft. Some of us may already be ramping up into our 2026 big boards. Hint, hint, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. But make sure, tune in every night. Owen and Newt here on Thursday nights. Me and Jacob on Wednesday nights. Next week, we've got our big epic mock, 32 GM mock, 7 rounds. We are going the distance. Dane Brugler's got his beast. This is our beast. So make sure you tune in Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Make sure you check it out. But again, it hasn't been said enough. I said it in the last episode. I'll say it in this one too. Newt hammered on it. Jim, we appreciate you for allowing us to come into this space and put on this show.
So I've had the time of my life this draft season. Like when I put this together, I had no idea it was going to be this much fun. So thanks definitely to the 3 of you. As they said, you can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No I in Fanatic. It is the same on YouTube as it is on X Twitter. And daily draft content. This is our 2nd podcast today. We've already had comments on the mock draft we did. So among the comments were, how did T-Mac fall to round 2? And how did the Packers get Shamar Stewart and Darian Porter? Right.
The Packers are the greatest organization in the world. world.
Newt, I was going to compliment this thing you have pinned to the top of your Twitter. I've been playing around with this entire time while we were doing our intros because I didn't know that was, or our introductions, because I didn't think that was a thing. And this is phenomenal. But after that, no, I'm not gonna do the thing I just did.
He's gonna report it. That's what he's doing after that.
He's gonna be like, "Hey, this link is spam. Take it down now."
So Bill mentioned that we have Epic Mock 25 next week, and actually, this podcast is going to be hosting round 1 of Epic Mock 25. And you will see Bill and Drew kick off Epic Mock 25 at 6:15 a.m. Eastern. And then a little while later at that night, you are going to see Price Carter join. And then you are going to see Newt and Owen take it until we finish. And you're going to see, every team right now has a round 1 pick. So there's a good chance that we're talking about most teams. We don't know if teams are trading out yet. But in addition to that, there's war rooms. And I can tell you that Owen and I, as Bills fans, we have a war room group chat. One person's already left the chat because they couldn't handle the battle. And that was just the chat.
That chat, Randall's vicious.
This kind of thing. So, and it's actually kind of funny too, because Owen and Randall have never met. Like, you guys may have interacted with each other, but you haven't podcasted with each other before. So it's interesting, right? Because it's like, I consider like every draft professor is among my best friends, right? So like, obviously I like podcasting with Owen. I like podcasting with Randall and everybody. But Owen and Randall haven't actually like been in the same room yet. So it's going to be fun because while Owen's on here, Randall is going to be running the Buffalo Bills War Room. Then on Friday night, the roles reverse for rounds 2 and 3 of Epic Mock 25. Owen is going to be running the Buffalo Bills War Room on Friday night, and Randall is going to be on the podcast calling out every round 2 and round 3 pick. So if you are still watching now, we're going to plug Epic Mock, and you're going to hear a lot about it on Twitter. You're going to hear about it on every podcast from now until then. This is what draft professors do. It is going to be the biggest mock draft of the season. 32 people from around the world. We have people drafting from Europe, everybody. Like, we have people from around the world.
Global.
Epic Mock 25. It's going to be a lot of fun. So why don't we make this like a free-for-all with the rest of the tackles? We've done a really good job. I think we've covered at least 7 or 8 guys. But like, I'm seeing like, Emory Jones. I'm seeing we got to give Jalen Travis some love. So who are some of the guys that like you see on somebody else's board that maybe you want to ask them about?
So I think I'll speak for Owen as well. Bill, me and Owen got a chance to talk about Carson Vincent. I think it was Owen. Was that episode 1 together?
Was it? It may have been. I can check.
That might have been the OG Trench Talk episode.
I think it was. I think it might have been. Donovan Jackson, Carson Vincent, and a couple of others. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Bill, do you want to talk about Carson Vincent? A little bit of background. I have him as an offensive guard. He's, to me, like, I saw him at the Senior Bowl against Landon Jackson, and I was like, I'm not super thrilled about this. But do you want to talk about Carson Vincent as a tackle?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say, and I'll throw it back to my lovely co-host on Wednesday nights, Jacob Roach, writes for the OBR as well. He asked this question, and I'll ask it to you guys here. Do you know why Carson Vincent has to keep his hands in his pockets when he's out in public?
I do not.
Not a clue.
It's because they're registered weapons.
There it is.
Violent. Hand placement is violent with this guy. And we often talk HBCU prospects. They don't get nearly enough love. And Carson Vincent is a guy that should get that. 6'7", 314, 34.5-inch arm length, 84 and 3/8 inch wingspan. He has every box checked to play the tackle position. He uses a 6'7" frame effectively. You know, we talked about earlier with Holland Pierce that ability to kind of bend his head because he's too tall. Vincent doesn't have that problem. He plays leaned back and in a better stance. He has a motor that is just very, very competitive. He is not going to give up on any play. He's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Jupiter, and he shows it on every single play. His kick slide does need refinement and reinforcement against NFL talent. It's serviceable. It is passable in the NFL, but he needs to get quicker with it. He needs to get more efficient with it. Obviously, he also has an overextension issue and loses his balance too often. It's the old, over too far his skis, right? He's leaning too far forward out in front of his skis. If he learns to lean back a little bit, that'll clear up a lot of things. Yes, there is a level of competition concern, and you saw it against Auburn, especially playing up to that next level of competition, but I don't think it's as big an issue as people think. For me, he is a developmental tackle guy. He's right outside of my top 100. I would take him in the early parts of round 4. And for me, his game reminds me a lot of Brandon Albert when he was at Virginia, who ended up going in the first round. So I would feel comfortable. Again, it depends on what sort of offensive line coach I have. But if I have an offensive line coach who can help develop that kick slide, who can help him learn proper knee bend, because he can bend serviceably. He needs to work on it, but every tall offensive tackle needs to work on their knee bend. They all have that same problem. But Vincent has things that you can't teach: a motor that doesn't quit, a chip on his shoulder the size of Jupiter, a mauling ability, communicates well with his teammates, but he didn't face the most sophisticated blitz packages and the stunts packages while he was at an HBCU. You just don't see that level of talent there. But if I'm looking for a guy who I can develop to either be a swing tackle or a developmental left tackle, either as a backup or a spot starter, Vincent is my guy, because like I said, he arrives with violence and he leaves with violence.
I love that. I was going to say, so Jersey Alberco for She Said TV mocked him to the Packers, and I've always been a big Vincent fan. Owen, I don't want to speak for you, but I think same thing. You've been a really big Vincent fan throughout. I like the guy a ton. I think he's wonderful. I just counted out he's 26 on my board in terms of offensive linemen, like the full group. And he's ahead of guys. He's like, for me, he's ahead of Holland Pierce. He's ahead of a Jonah Monheim, a Jack Nelson, a Chase Lunt that we talked about earlier. And I really like him. And I think he does bring that opportunity to play as a really strong 6 offensive lineman or like a spot starter. And maybe it is the level of play that he faced at Alabama A&M, where he never got the opportunity to like face that tougher competition. And I know I read a couple articles that he stayed at Alabama A&M. He had FBS offers. He chose to stay there because he really liked the coaching staff and he appreciated what they did for him. And I respect the heck out of that. You see him go in his junior and senior year against 3 FBS teams, D1, FBS teams. And he really does not play that well. And Landon Jackson did not make him look good at the Senior Bowl during the game. I know he had a really good week in practice, but I think my hope kind of with what you just said is like, give this guy a month, give this guy 2 months, let him develop that, because he's got that work ethic and all those things, and kind of erring on that side. Like I can definitely see that then. I don't know if I'm ever going to be like, yeah, totally left tackle. But I've always been a fan of like, man, grab this guy day 3. Like if he is on your board, grab him day 3, because he works his ass off. He's a great kid. He deserves every bit of the top 150 buzz that he's getting. If he can play tackle, even better. Hell, draft him day 2. Make him one of the last picks on day 2, and really spark the nation with that. But you kind of making me rethink a lot of the ways that I thought about Carson Vincent, just with a lot of those things that you're pointing out as I'm thinking about him in terms of, what did he not do, but like, why did he not do that? And there's a lot of, things that might factor into that.
So, like, as I'm looking at your tackle boards, one of the things that stands out to me, so Parker and Drew, who are really late on Tuesdays, they're like 10 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. They pretty much have done offensive line since the Senior Bowl. Like, literally every single podcast since the Senior Bowl has been on some flavor of offensive line.
Respect.
They did like a true tackle episode. They did every offensive lineman in the draft episode. Like, they've broken this down. But what's fascinating is once you get beyond the top 3 linemen on your board, Rick, for the most part, 2 of the top 3 linemen on each board are the same. But what you see from 4 to 10 is like whatever you call like shotgun spray. Nothing's moving in any specific, like there's not necessarily a trend other than the fact it's the same player names, but one guy has the player at 4, another guy has him at 7 or 8.
Yep.
So I think how a team, let's say, sees the tackles or which guy matches their scheme, just because you see them as offensive tackle 8 on one board doesn't mean they don't go at the top of round 2. Because you could see like Kelvin Banks at 8 on one board and Kelvin Banks is 1 on another. Like, observe that, right? I don't think there's any other position in the draft where the rankings are that variable. Right? Nearly everybody agrees on the top 2 or 3 corners or the top 2 or 3 wide receivers. They might be in a different order, but it's still the same group of players. Here, there's even more variance. So, like, Owen, any thoughts on like that variance in, let's say, the tackle rankings, and like, does the variance tell you anything?
Yeah. So just to further your point, I have only 2 offensive linemen general that have true first round grades for me, and it's the 2 guys at the top of this board here, with Simmons and Campbell. And then when you look at that, so like Connerly and Membu had the exact same grade, and they're right next to each other on my board. I could flip them around and be totally fine with it. It just comes more for what your flavor is and what your kind of like the conversation we had earlier about athleticism versus technique wise, and seeing the evolution in that, which is why I have Connerly that 1 spot above Membu, but I really could be flipped either way. And then you go to Banks and Trapilo, both again they're like a couple, like a point or 2 lower, and then they're both the same point again. So you could flip those guys for me. And I almost debated putting Trapilo above Banks just to dig one to Newt, because I knew Banks was his top guy.
Yeah.
But
don't worry, I did that for the both of us.
I went with
hey,
with
Newt,
how I actually
here's one
about
of these for you, bud.
I went with what I actually felt was right with Banks, because I think he has a better power profile. But like they're both good, and they graded out equally to me, even though they have different elements of the game that are better than one or better than the other. And then you slide down to like Belton, and then Emory Jones, Charles Grant. Those are guys that like Belton's my last round 2 grade, but then Jones and Grant and Ursery could all be they're knocking on the door of that. They're like round 2, round 3 / round 3 grades for me. And then there's a little drop off from there. And now I haven't gotten around to watching Cam Williams or some of the other guys that you may have in those day 2 conversations. But for what I have watched, there are clusters of guys where you have different flavors of tackle, but they're all to a point where you're comfortable drafting them in these same areas. And then which is perfect for teams, because then if you have a guy graded the same, like if I was a team that had Banks and Trapilo graded the same, but I run a lot more gap power and I run a lot more plays out to the boundary and wanting to get guys out in front, to lead block for my backs and really pave guys out of the way, I'm going to go with Banks. If I want someone who's more technically sound in pass pro and can be a more prominent blocker at the second level in zone blocking, I can take Trapilo, but it depends on what my scheme's going to be. But I'm not going to be mad one way or the other if I land one of those two guys because they're both equally graded for me.
Okay. Hey, Bill Sparks, are you taking the bet that Jay Butler is giving Owen here in the chat?
That Emory Jones goes in the second round. So, Owen, am I right? You said you had him third round?
Yeah, I have him with a third round grade right now.
I'm lower. I have him as a fourth.
I feel like I like Emory Jones probably the best, and I still have him as the third round grade. Like,
yeah,
to me, he's 70th on my board. And I went into this exercise once again. I rewatched him. I was like, I like Emory Jones a little bit more than I thought, and I bumped him up a little bit. He's a tree trunk of a man, but dear God, when he gets his mitts on you, like you're not moving anywhere. Like he's a power blocker. But like, I don't know. I don't see him even as a third round or as a second round guy. And if I'm the highest on him, Bill, you said you're like fourth.
Yeah, I've got a fourth on him just because what we talked about earlier with Holland Pierce, how he's very susceptible to overcommitting to the outside and someone getting inside with him. Emory Jones is the opposite. He commits too often to the inside and folks get around him on the outside and he doesn't have that foot speed to recover. And I wouldn't take him, especially because he also has issues with his footwork and his hand placement in the run game. And especially if you're going to use him in even a gap scheme or a zone scheme where you're asking him to get out in space in front of someone, I'm not confident he doesn't trip over his own shoelaces.
And
that's so
something
rude
to think about, right? Because I
Exactly.
heard that you guys have him right in the 70 range, or at least I think that was the highest ranking that I heard. So for him to go
I
in
have him at
round
70, yeah.
2,
I also have him at 70 exactly.
yeah.
Whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Oh my
I would say
God.
he's not even in my top 100, so I am further down.
But my point was, for him to go in round 2, you need to look at the back of round 2, right? So the teams that are picking there would include Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, Philadelphia, right? I may have left out Detroit, but the question would be, is he a fit for Detroit? Like maybe I could see that one, but okay, it won't be Buffalo. Is he the right fit for Baltimore? Is he the right fit for Kansas City? Is he the right fit for Philadelphia? Like if Philadelphia drafts there, I think they're going true tackle. Like I hear a lot of Emory Jones as a guard. I don't know that Emory Jones is the right player for the Eagles.
For Emory Jones, I would be with Bill if Emory Jones. So like the reason I said Trapilo is one of my top guys when it comes to hand technique and pass pro. Emory Jones for me is probably up there with him, like either like 1A, 1B. Like his use of his hands and his weaponizing of his length in pass pro specifically, when he's able to square up to guys and be able to get hands on early and then reset and replace his hands. Like he's one of the best in this class at doing his very active hands, constantly working to get towards that guy, the center of mass of the defensive lineman. It's where everything else with this game, where I think he's powerful. I think he does that at an elite level with his hand placement in pass pro. But then his footwork is all over the place, and it negatively impacts him all the time. Whether he's oversetting inside, like Bill said, I do think he also has an issue where he can overset outside if he's trying to compensate for that speed. So, like, I think he has the length and the technique and understanding of playing at tackle, and he has the athleticism laterally to get out in space and block guys. He's a good enough athlete to do that. It's more so what's his going to be if you're going to be running more of a zone heavy scheme. I can see him as a guard. I don't know if with his height and his length, you're going to want to play him at tackle. It's just whether or not you can break some of these bad habits and coach him up footwork wise enough to make you comfortable that he can be your tackle. So maybe Kansas City the back of the second round. If they don't go tackle at the end of the first, I could see them because they want a good guy who you could take quicker pass sets. You don't have to really ask him to muddy up his footwork and just get hands-on with guys and hold the ball long enough for Mahomes to get the ball out quickly. But other than that, like I don't really see him fitting any of the teams that we mentioned there at the late in the second round.
Yeah, I would say Washington and Detroit. If you're looking the back end of the second round, Detroit at 60, Washington at 61 are probably his best bets. This Washington, especially with them running more of a spread it out, kind of open it up at passing offense with Jaden Daniels, he's not going to be asked to be in that run scheme as much. Yes, they do have RPOs, so he's got to be able to get out there, but like you said, he's probably one of the best pass protecting tackles in this class, and whoever drafts him has to understand that. Do you use him as a swing tackle, rotational basis in pass protection while you raise his floor as a run offensive tackle? You can, but it's going to tip your hand every time you see him trotting out on that field.
Yeah, Bill, I was going to ask, like, so if he was to kind of flip that around to go to Detroit, because I don't know if you know this guy named Penei Sewell there.
Yes.
That is,
yes, I think I've heard of it.
I think he's got the right tackle position down. Do you think, and I guess it goes back down to the conversation of like flipping. Do you think then he flips to like be the successor to Taylor Decker, or he ends up being an interior offensive lineman for Detroit?
Are you talking Sewell being the
no,
replacement for
not
Decker?
Sewell. I think
okay.
I think
Sewell.
Yeah, I think Sewell is forever going to be the right tackle. I don't see Detroit moving him.
Like,
I'm seeing Emory Jones.
I think if Bo and Jones were on the board, Bo seems to fit what Detroit needs more than Jones.
Yes.
Right. Between the fact that Bo could play center, he could play interior, and theoretically Bo might be able to play tackle, even though I don't think that that's the best spot for him.
No, Bo's best spot is on the inside. But yeah, if you're looking at Emory Jones in Detroit, I think you could make him the successor to Taylor Decker, but don't expect much out of him in year one. It would be solely that you sit him.
Yeah, but I think like what you're saying then, if like he's a successor and you get a year off, like you come in maybe like a Cam Jurgens, where and it's a little bit different conversation, but like, hey, Cam Jurgens, you're the successor to Kelsey. You have to play right guard this year because of XYZ. But because of this, like, we're looking to slot you in here. I could see that then if you give him 1-2 years to kind of build behind that. I like that approach. It goes back to what you said before. If you're going to put a speed rusher on the attacking the left tackle, I have issues with that with Emory Jones, where like that's the weak point of his game. And in college, I think once again he met what was needed of him barely. In the NFL, it's going to be a different beast, and so like that worries me a little bit if he's asked to go to the left side.
I do have to preface this by saying I know the person who commented this, and they're an LSU fan, so that's probably why this comment came in here. But yeah, I do. We hadn't touched on Emory Jones yet in this pod, and I feel like he's definitely someone who's worth that conversation for the day 2 guys.
Cool.
Yeah, like I said, I went into this conversation liking Emory Jones a lot more. Like I had probably a 4th or a 5th, like a day 3 grade on him for sure. Went back, watched him, and I was like, you know what? Like as far as handling power goes, this guy's one of the best. His footwork needs some improvement. Like to me, he has some athletic limitations. I don't see it necessarily as much of a detriment as other guys, but I think that there are some things that he brings to the game that are really, really intriguing. But I think there's a ceiling to him. And that's kind of like where that worry sets in for me. But I do like Emory Jones. I might be the highest on him. Like I said, number 70 overall for me.
Well, we've been going for like 90 minutes straight. We should probably close this down. Owen, do you have final exams coming up soon?
I have finals. It's the first week of May or last week of April.
Oh, okay.
I had an accounting exam this morning. So we're on the second rounds of exams, and then we have our finals after this after a couple more weeks.
I love how Owen's taking final exams and I'm giving final exams. I find that funny.
That is funny. Yeah. So, Owen, I could probably handle accounting, but we don't want me with statistics. Like, oh my God, my master's statistics class, like that was my only B. When I went for my master's, I got straight A's for the first time in my life, and then statistics was a B. Like,
yeah, today's exam was on depreciation, inventory, and bad debt with uncollectible accounts. So that was a fun one to sit there.
that sounds so exciting. I'd rather talk about it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And just so you know, my girlfriend's an accountant, and that made her laugh right behind the camera. So, that's pretty good. For Owen, Newt, Bill, myself, the 52 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Epic Mock 25 next week. See you soon.
Peace.